Hey everybody, welcome back to The Beard and the Bald. I am Paul Shirey, the beard. I have my beard back.
Hey, it's coming back. Yeah.
And we have the bald Christopher Bumbray. He is still bald. He is not going to pull a tricky one like I did by shaving my beard.
Got a bit of a beard going though.
You know what would be funny though, if we did sometime, is like we start off the show and like I'll shave my head and my face, and then you get like a toupee or something, and like you have the beard and the hair and just fuck with people. I think that would be pretty hilarious. I would do it. I would shave my head for that.
I'll do it. Sure. You need a good wig.
But you got to get something like Pedro's toupee from Napoleon Dynamite. It's got to be something really fucking fancy.
Yeah, it's got to look good.
Real swirly and just like, whoa, look at you, Christopher. Yeah, so you need a flip. Oh shit. So we've both been a little busy the past couple of weeks. Doing
and the weeks coming up are not going to be any less busy. So I was at VidCon and now I'm going to Comic-Con and
yeah, it's a busy time. It's the summer busy season. But we'll try and stay as consistent as possible.
It is weird how the summer, with Joe Blow, I do find the summer is a busier time of year for me, which is weird because it seems like not as much is going on, but in some ways, because I think that's when we kind of change things a little bit. And, so it seems like there's always stuff like that going. And I usually end up getting really busy in July and August, it seems. But then things will slow down a bit in the fall.
Well, and then
I think so much is happening
in the fall again too, like with TIFF and stuff like that. Like,
but then so much is happening in the fall. It feels like we're kind of like, we're on our strategy. Everything's, it's just always stuff going on.
I mean, even I would say probably the slowest time of the year would be like January through March.
Oh yeah, that's always slow. Well, I mean, because nothing's coming out. I read something very interesting though, because I was talking about that with Burge and Gaius and a couple of the people that work for the site. So the next couple months are pretty slow for movies until October. We don't have much coming out. There's Bullet Train, but that's about it for big movies. But the reason is that there is a huge shutdown, not even a shutdown, but like a problem with the supply chain for these digital houses. Because the thing is, because of COVID, everything got backed up. And now they're having a really hard time delivering stuff on time. And that's why Salem's Lot got delayed to April. It wasn't because the movie isn't good or anything like that. It's because the effects just aren't done yet.
Yeah. It's like the first casualty of VFX COVID rather than production COVID.
Yeah, that because it's different because there was a big delay, right? And it's just different. And so if you look at the schedule, there's really nothing VFX heavy coming out until mid-October when they start, when Halloween comes out and different movies like that. There's no real
Black Adam.
Because Black Adam. I mean, Black Adam's that was another one too that was set for the summer, and it's the thing about it is that they last fall we had like Dune and these huge movies come out in No Time to Die, but they were all kind of leftovers, from the summer. Yeah. And you don't have that this year. So it's going to be August and September are going to be very slow for movies. It's going to be, but so like the last big one that they have is Bullet Train, and Bullet Train's been done for a while. Like it's ready to go for a bit. So,
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, and I think that's a good segue. We can hop back to Thor: Love and Thunder in a second, but I was reading this past week how a lot of these Marvel VFX teams are kind of coming out of the woodwork and saying that Marvel is like basically kind of like a VFX sweatshop and calling them a terrible fucking client and just kind of bad mouthing them. And there's people that are openly saying it on Twitter. And then you have people on Reddit threads that don't want to be identified that are saying, they've seen people, punch holes in walls and throw their computer screens and quit. And they're just being like worked to the bone over these VFX shots. And I think that Marvel is kind of monopolizing, the use of that because they can't get away from it. Yeah. But I think you're starting to see wear and tear because a lot of complaints are kind of coming down the pike now about, hey, these effects look like shit. Yeah. And, Thor: Love and Thunder is one of those casualties. And you've seen it time and time again, especially on the Disney Plus series where, the effects are just lackluster in comparison to the features, But now it's kind of catching up. The features are starting to suffer. And I think it's this VFX teams are being stretched so thin, and they're not being compensated for the work that's being asked of them.
Well, I think part of it has to do with the supply chain. And I think that the fact is they're being told to rush things because they don't want to slow down, because they don't want to go a certain amount of months without a new Marvel movie, or a new Marvel show. But I do think it's going to result. It's a pretty shoddy product getting out there. And I mean, the big one that has been very controversial is the trailer for She-Hulk.
Oh, yeah. It looks terrible.
Really bad. And it's like, if that is the level of the effects are in the show, they should not be putting it out until it's fixed. Because it's gonna be really mocked, and it'll really kind of sully their name. And they said that it wasn't final, but I don't understand why you release a trailer with that like that for a Marvel thing that weren't the finished polished effects. I'm thinking that is what she's gonna look like on the show. I
don't think how much different is it gonna be? I mean, it looks like Tatiana Maslany in the trailer, but it looks like a Sony PlayStation version of Tatiana Maslany.
It's weird. It's really weird. And I mean, Thor: Love and Thunder. Yeah, the effects weren't anything great about them. Like, I mean, I think that they are suffering a bit, and especially because you're seeing movies like this on the big screen. But I do find special effects in general, though, they seem to be a lot less perfect than they used to be. And there's, the Gray Man we're going to talk about. And I saw it theatrically, and I thought the effects in that movie were kind of shoddy, and I think you're seeing a lot of them doing it.
They're doing it on the cheap now too, as they're finding new ways to do it on green screen. Like, green screen has kind of gotten in the way, as much as it may have lowered budgets. It's kind of getting in the way of quality. You look at the movies that you and I kind of grew up on, like the 80s and 90s, where, they're like, we're doing all this shit in camera practical.
It's aged much better and it's held up. And if you look at movies from the early days of CGI, when they started using it all the time, they're almost unwatchable now. Look at Lost in Space. Look at anything from the 90s or the early 2000s. It looks like cartoons now. I was even, but then you look at them done right, though, in movies. And I find that, it depends on the studio. I think that, one of the things I like about Warner Brothers movies is that always the effects are really kind of good for their films.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that Black Adam is going to have very good special effects, right? Just like Dune had amazing VFX, but also a guy like Villeneuve would never let a shot, because every shot in that movie, he's probably looking over, and he's ultra careful with.
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for the filmmakers themselves. I think that makes a tremendous difference. And I have not seen The Gray Man, but I've seen the trailers, and it looks like a Russo Brothers kind of effects, which are not so much polished. They look comic booky. You know what I'm saying? Like that's how I kind of see it. And even though The Gray Man is supposed to be like, a real world film, it still has that. To me, it feels like Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
It's not. It's basically a superhero movie.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the vibe that I get just looking at the trailer. But yeah, I think what's happening too is, Marvel as a brand, I think that, this is what happens when you get so fucking big, and with them expanding to, like, they went from 2 movies a year now to 3 to 4 movies a year, plus like 7 or 8 series per year. Like, that's an overwhelming amount. And if you're trying to maintain that same level of quality, especially with the VFX, that's a tall order. Are there more VFX teams coming in? Are there like new graduates, new people that are coming in to fill those ranks to do that? No. What's happening is the people that are very good at it, that are doing those jobs, are just being stretched thin. And that's why we're seeing this crack in.
Yeah, and a lot of shoddy product coming out, and I don't find the Disney shows for me have never been great. Like I don't.
They're bad.
I still haven't finished Obi-Wan. I've only seen the first 2 episodes. The only Marvel shows that I finished WandaVision and Loki. Those are the only ones, and I'm not.
Those are the only good ones. Those are, you finished. You don't need to go. Don't watch Moon Knight. Don't watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Don't watch. They're terrible.
We should talk about Thor: Love and Thunder, though, because I think I liked it more than you did. It seems like I'm one of the few people that really enjoyed that movie, but I didn't view it as, I watched it as a casual fan, though, and I watched it more as, and I enjoyed it more as a comedy. I think that's really how ultimately I viewed the movie, not as a superhero thing, that took things seriously. I viewed it almost as a spoof, and I think
that's probably one of the issues, is that
But you see, I'm not very precious about that kind of thing. Like, I really liked Hemsworth and Portman's performances in the movie. Like, I thought that was, for me, that really kind of made the film.
See, I didn't think Portman was good in the film at all.
Really? I thought she was really good in it. Yeah.
I don't feel like it's kind of like, to me, it was very much like how she was utilized in the Star Wars prequels, where it was like, I don't feel like she was utilized to her full potential. Like, Portman can be really funny, and she's actually.
I thought she was great. The one I felt that was completely kind of pointless in the film was Tessa Thompson. I felt like they gave her nothing to do in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, they're just like, hey, we're gonna like make her King Valkyrie and just really try to push the LGBTQ stuff. But even that, like, they didn't really do anything. Like, it was just like
they didn't particularly push the LGBTQ stuff, though. I think that's over.
But I mean, this is coming from, kind of that side of the fence. We're like, we wanted more of it. And it's like, there was really nothing to see per se. It's just kind of like, okay, whatever. But yeah, they didn't do anything with her journey. There was nothing new for her character other than she just kind of acted annoyed, throughout the film. And I felt like that there was just so many missed opportunities and so many cool things happened off screen. Like, we really should have seen Jane Foster become Thor the first time. I realized they were trying to save the reveal, but that's part of that's like the cool shit that you want to see. This is check the box cool shit. Like, hey, and they tease it where she sees Mjolnir sitting there, and then it starts to like crumble, and then you see lightning, and then they're like, cut away, and you're like, it's like the Godzilla 2014 thing where you're like, oh, it's about goodbye.
It's funny, you see, I think the fact is, though, I'm just not as big of a fan, so I didn't really care about any of that,
I know, but Chris, there's tons of fans that do care.
I know. But the thing is, honestly, I've gotten to the point, though, and I was talking to Travis Hobson about this too, because I was on his podcast talking about it. And the thing is,
fucking traitor.
Well, what's happening is, though, I do feel like I've gotten to that age, that I'm not necessarily the target audience anymore, and I've kind of embraced that a bit. More so than I think other people have.
I don't buy that, though. It's the people that are creating this stuff for our age. We are the exact target audience. We are the people that are making this shit. I feel like there's at no point in my life am I going to check out and say, well, it's just not for me anymore. Bullshit. As long as I have a pulse and as long as I am thinking, breathing human being that has an opinion and a take, then that stuff to me is for me. It's for anybody. Now, some stuff may be catered to a very specific targeted audience, and that's fine, but that doesn't mean that I couldn't love it. Now, I haven't watched Miss Marvel, but there's a chance I could watch Miss Marvel and absolutely love it. Did the filmmakers that made that, who are my age or around my age, make that for a 45-year-old male? No, but that doesn't mean I can't love it. That doesn't mean I can't just absolutely fucking adore it. Like,
of course,
Girls, I fucking love Mean Girls. In what way do I relate to Mean Girls?
Oh, sure.
Almost
I'm not saying that that's impossible, but I just feel like Marvel, for me, I missed the boat on it, I think, to a certain extent. And I think that I was always kind of like that about the series, though. Because, I've never watched a Marvel movie more than once. Never. I think the only one that I did was probably the first Iron Man. Right. So it's never.
I think that comes down to a personality thing.
Yeah. So it's never
not so much it's not made for me. It's just that it's for you personally. You don't take it.
I'm just not a hardcore fan like you are, or like Travis is.
Sure, and that's cool. Like, but to say that it's not made for you, or that like it's like no longer applicable to you, I don't think is a fair shake. I would say
it's not applicable to me, but it's just that I do find that I'm more at peace with the fact that, like, okay, I didn't really care for this one. Who cares? It's not a big deal.
Sure. I mean, and really, it's kind of like, for you, that's like a little, I guess, secret weapon you could have in that sense, and that, you don't have, those kind of stakes in those films, and that's cool. But the vast majority of people, like, that's why it's like the biggest fucking studio in the world at this point.
I mean, the fact that you can open a movie to $145 million plus and people view it as a disappointment is something, I mean, that's, yeah, it is kind of. Yeah,
that's very true. But anyways, so just to clarify my comments on Thor, like, for one thing, I love Thor Ragnarok. I think Ragnarok is fucking awesome. I love it. I love Taika Waititi's take. I thought the script, the story, the action, the music, everything was perfectly blended. And I felt I don't know who said it. Somebody wrote a review and said that Thor: Love and Thunder is kind of like a victory lap after Ragnarok. And I feel like that's kind of what Waititi did. Like he had this idea, but it was just kind of this, it was like just a concoction of shit. It did feel like a comedy. It felt like, but it felt like a bunch of ideas just kind of thrown into the wall. Like, yeah, it's pretty funny. Let's just do that. But there wasn't a lot of care taken in terms of like what the actual narrative structure was and all that other stuff. They're like, yeah, that's kind of funny. Let's do that. Or that's kind of cool. Let's do that.
Victory lap thing does happen more often than you'd think, though, because one that I always thought was like that was Sam Mendes when he came back to do Spectre after Skyfall, where Skyfall was kind of everything he needed to say about the Bond franchise.
Yeah.
And then it was like, you got to do one more. And then he came back and he Spectre and like, that's fine. So it's kind of,
that's it. Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like, this is one of those things where, and it's something that I continue to notice with these Marvel properties, particularly the TV shows, where they make this big shit about, oh, we're hiring all the right people to do this show and this movie and whatnot. And we're just going to let them do whatever the fuck they want. And I feel like what's happened is the reins have been loosened to giving these like kind of like unknown people like an opportunity to do these shows. But what they're losing is that narrative structure, that kind of connective tissue that made the MCU so great. And it's why this like phase 4 is such a fucking nightmare in terms of like making any sense of it. I was working on this story the other day and I was like kind of researching it and I really hadn't even thought of it. Because even though I'm a fan, I'm not somebody that like goes to bed at night praying to fucking Kevin Feige or any such shit like that. Like I enjoy comic book movies. When I was a kid, there were no comic book movies and I was a comic book nerd. This is kind of like the heyday in that sense. But now it's starting to get to a point where they're losing focus big time. And with phase 4, at this point, we're like 7 series and 4 or 5 movies in. And there's no sense of who the main villain is going to be. Like Kang was teased at the end of Loki, like very briefly in the final episode. And they're like, yeah, it's going to be the new bad guy. But people are like, I don't know what the fuck this guy is. And there's no sense of like where any of this is going in terms of what they've established before. Now we could say, well, who gives a shit? They're just going to do whatever they do and blah, 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 blah. But that goes completely against like this decade-long story that they built through phase 1 to phase 3 that had people hyped and energized and like, oh man, that was fucking cool. Now it's kind of like, I have no fucking idea what's going on. Like what? I have no idea. I don't know who the villain is. Could anybody say who's in the actual Avengers now? Like who are the Avengers? Who took over Captain America and Iron Man's place at this point? There's nothing. And yet you have movies like Doctor Strange where they're like, Doctor Strange is like, hey, we'll get you back on the lunchbox. We'll get you back in the team. Like what fucking team? Who's even in the Avengers? Like there's just a lot of things that aren't being followed up on that were before. And it's just kind of become this mishmash hodgepodge of different visions and takes without the narrative structure that made any kind of sense. And I think Kevin Feige is going to address that when you're at Comic-Con next week. It is next week, right? I think that's where there's going to be a big push to kind of clarify where everything is going, because they're starting to lose audiences in that way. And audiences are starting to break apart and form into their little sects of oh, I'm a stand for this or I'm a stand for that. And that's just what happens when things get so big. It's like the Roman Empire. It got so big. They're like, we're going to have 2 capitals. We're just going to keep expanding until the whole fucking thing crumbles and Rome is gone forever. And I feel like that's kind of where Marvel is headed if they don't fucking tighten the reins on what they're doing. So we'll see. But for me, Thor: Love and Thunder, I'm going to treat this as like a Chris Bumbray watch. I really don't ever need to see it again. I'm like, I'm good. Like, I can't imagine watching Thor: Love and Thunder again and being like, oh, actually, I was totally wrong. It's so much better. The more I've thought about it, the less I've liked it. And I didn't hate it. I didn't walk out of the theater like, that was a piece of shit. But the more I've thought about Thor: Love and Thunder, I've been like, I just have so many issues with it. I wanted to just enjoy it and have fun with it like I did with Ragnarok, but it just did not happen. I felt just kind of a waste, personally. It's a mess.
It's just hard for me to engage on that level with Marvel. Like I don't even have anything else really to say about Thor: Love and Thunder. It's just I'm not as engaged with it. I probably have more to say about the next movie we're going to discuss, The Gray Man. So
I think part of that though is that
because that's more of a genre
Thor: Love and Thunder was better. you would have more to say about it.
I don't know though. I mean, it's weird.
Kind of throwaway entertainment.
Even though Avengers Endgame and stuff, I didn't have much to say about those either. Like it's hard for me to engage on that level beyond, just mere enjoyment, but then something like The Gray Man, for instance, is, that's more of a genre that I'm comfortable with, I think, because it's an action movie and I get that genre and I get the roots and I get the influences that they're going for. I get the holy text of whatever it is that they're doing with it. So it's funny. So I spoke to Jeremy Edwards, who's a big fan of the series of novels this is based on, and he seemed to enjoy the movie, but he told me that it doesn't follow at all the novels. That like they're totally doing their own thing. So The Gray Man, I saw it. They wanted us to see it theatrically, the critics, and I'm kind of wondering why, because it did feel like a movie that was. I mean, the Russos are all saying that they built it for the big screen, but then they're also saying that theaters are elitist or whatever. So I feel like that's a cop out. I feel like they really did kind of build it for a really good home theater, and I think it's going to look amazing, in a home theater. I don't think I necessarily needed to see it in theaters, because it feels, even though it's a really expensive movie and it's very broad and and it's big, it's basically like a superhero movie. There's something about Netflix movies where I feel like they really kind of account for like the zone out aspect, where you can kind of like check your phone and fade in and out of a movie a little, and I mean, The Gray Man, so I enjoyed it, but it's basically a superhero movie without the costumes, right? Like the action, there's a lot of good action in it, but it's at such a ridiculous level. Like there's a scene in the movie where Ryan Gosling like fucking blows up a plane and then jumps out free falling, grabs a parachute from another guy, and it's all done with like CGI. And that's happened before. They've done that very same scene in other movies, like in Moonraker or in Point Break. And it was
Daylights.
But the thing is, they did it for real with stuntmen and stuff like that. And this, it's all just CGI kind of gobbledygook, right? So it's not as exciting. But then The Gray Man also has some hand-to-hand stuff though, where they strip it down, and that's when the movie's at its best. And I wish that that's what the Russos had kind of focused on, because they have a lot of good things on their side of them. I mean, the premise and the dialogue is kind of whatever, like it's nothing that you haven't seen before. But what they have is they've got a really, really good leading man with Ryan Gosling, who's fully committed, got himself into crazy shape for the role, and seems to genuinely be enjoying himself. You got him. You got Chris Evans, who's really chewing the scenery as the villain, kind of doing what he did in Knives Out a little bit, and who's having a great time. You've got Ana de Armas, who's great in these kinds of movies, even though she's playing exactly, and I mean exactly, the same role she played in No Time to Die.
Oh, really? Is she like a bumbling kind of like new?
She's not bumbling, but it's the same kind of thing, right? And very similar action scenes, and they have the same kind of relationship. But it's just the acting, the performances really make the movie fun, and it's got like a good style and it's got energy. It's not a game changer, and it's a lot of stuff that kind of has been done before, like a million times. Like there's a kid in jeopardy. It's the kid from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that has to be rescued. There's the old mentor who's in trouble. And
they don't chase a little 10-year-old around and not able to catch her as super spies, right? Like they don't have that problem.
There's nothing like that, but it does get to that point though, almost where it felt like Princess Leia, to be honest. And I was like, did they really need the kid? But it was, but the it's not a gritty movie at all. I mean, it's very,
well, it's PG-13, like.
Oh, and it's painfully PG-13. Like the thing is, like you have armies of people, hundreds of people getting killed, and there's not a drop of blood. And Jeremy Edwards took me to task for this, because there's a little blood in a scene where a guy gets stabbed in the hand, but like, and there's a little blood, but it's not gore. It's not, people are being mowed down, and it's that same bloodless Marvel violence where all this collateral damage is happening, but there's no urgency to it.
Yeah.
You don't feel like innocent people have died, even though they probably would. You don't really care about it. It's like you just kind of watch it, and it's like whatever. It's like wallpaper.
Yeah.
But that said, when they have like a good mano a mano scrap, like Gosling and Evans fighting it out, that's well done, and that's cool. Or there's a guy in the movie that's really good. This guy Dhanush, who's a Tamil actor. He's like a superstar in India. And he's really cool in it, because the guy's got like a lot of presence, and he's, it's like a movie star.
He's not the guy from Extraction, is he?
No, it's a different guy.
Okay.
But I guess they're big Bollywood fans, or this is Tamil guy, but they brought in a guy who's got a lot of presence, a lot of personality, and a lot of and he's kind of a cool little role, and he's got a good fight scene with Gosling, but it also feels like they're really trying to set up this like Gray Man extended universe where there's people.
Oh yeah, the Russos have said emphatically that's what they're trying to do. Like they're looking to. And it's, the Gray Man has like 12 or 13 fucking novels. So there's plenty of material. And if they don't really give a fuck and they're just doing whatever they want to do, then they can just.
It's problematic when you do that, though, because if there's not enough of a strong base, they're not going to be able to turn it into a series. And I don't think the Gray Man is going to become a franchise for them. As much as I enjoyed it, and I liked it a lot more than Red Notice, I was very entertained by it. But it's not the kind of movie that you're like, oh, fuck, they're going to make a bunch of sequels. People aren't going to be able to wait. I feel like a lot of people are going to be like, oh, it was fun, but they're not going to be like almost like a 600. It's better than 600 Underground, but it's almost like that kind of thing where you're like, oh, okay, yeah, it was a fun movie to watch, but it's not like, oh, I can't wait for the next one. Like, it's not going to be like that. I think it could have been like that, though, especially with Gosling in that role, because Gosling's performance is perfect. He's really on point in it. But then it's also interesting to compare it because there's two shows out there that are strikingly similar, The Terminalist and The Old Man, and both of them are way better than The Gray Man.
Sure. Which is ironic because The Gray Man costs like $200 million.
I know, but you don't need $200 million though. That's the thing. You don't need it when you're doing that kind of story. Yeah. You don't need $200 million. You don't need to throw everything but the kitchen sink into it. Because with The Gray Man, they're trying to do Mission Impossible and they've got the money and that's great. But, I'm more interested in, the character and the performance, so I would have loved to have seen The Gray Man as a limited series that cost like a third of what the movie cost, but with Gosling doing interesting things, because he's the reason I kind of like that movie, because I liked what he was doing. I liked his performance. I think he's a great actor. And they also they stacked it too much, like Regé-Jean Page, he's so miscast in that movie. It's like a role that was written for like Bryan Cranston or Brian Cox, like an old man. And it's like this guy who's 30 and coiffed. Like it just doesn't make any sense. Like him, Jessica Henwick's character, it should have been like fucking, Samuel L. Jackson and like Helen Mirren. They should have been these older characters, but they're written as like 25-year-olds or something.
It does seem like the Gray Man is suffering from like a young people syndrome, because the oldest person they have is Billy Bob Thornton, and he's like,
and it's like but see that like Regé-Jean Page and Jessica Henwick are 30 years old and they're running the CIA. Like it doesn't make any sense, that's where it stops with them at 30. Like it doesn't make any fucking sense, but that aside, they cast them because they're hot. They wanted to cast them.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like the young people syndrome where it's like, well, we just need hot young stars. It doesn't matter if they fit the role or not.
And they didn't fit the role at all. But, that said, though, I thought Gosling was great. I thought Evans was great. And I thought De Armas was great. So,
well, I think to your point about it, the potentially not becoming a franchise, I think a lot of that would come down to cost. Can Netflix afford an annual $200 million Gray Man movie? Is it the hype going to be high enough for that? I don't know what they paid for Red Notice, but we got 2 more fucking Red Notice movies coming. So, but with Netflix, bleeding subscribers, even though they're still pulling in billions per year, they're still doing okay.
I feel like Red Notice isn't necessarily going to happen though. Those 2 movies, like they kept saying that they're going to happen. I don't know. I think that they're under pressure to frame these movies as successes, regardless of how many people are actually watching them. And The Gray Man, some story is going to come out and it's going to say it's the most watched Netflix movie in in a 12-hour period, or something, to make it look like it was a success. So I don't think we'll ever know if it was actually successful or not. And it's the same thing with
and it's hard to measure when you don't have actual ticket sales. And it's
the same thing with Red Notice. I don't know that Red Notice was successful. They say it was successful. Was it actually successful? Did it actually get them more subscribers? We really don't know.
Yeah. And it's the same with Disney Plus. They say shit like that too. Like, oh, this is the most streamed, blah, blah, blah. And we're like,
the Netflix stuff.
Show me the fucking data. Like, let's see the data on this, The
Netflix stuff that is successful, you can tell that it's successful because they're rushing shit out, So like Stranger Things is successful because they got that going, Bridgerton is successful. Okay. Cobra Kai is successful because they're rushing this shit out and they want to get it out there because they know that's what the subscribers want. I don't know that they've ever had a movie that was so successful that it really justified, you know, the costs that they put into it. I don't know.
Well, and those are, and actually those are great examples that you use, because who on the street is talking about Red Notice? Nobody. Who on the street is talking about Cobra Kai or Bridgerton or Stranger Things? Everybody's talking about those. Yeah. Nobody's talking about these movies though. And I think that's where, you know, and we're going to talk about, you know, the Russo brothers. They did this interview with THR that was, you know, rather blunt in some areas in terms of how they feel about things. But I remember they had said something about Extraction being viewed X amount of times that equaled in theatrical terms to like a $2 billion in box office, which, you know, I think I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm saying that, you know, in terms of people watching it versus the kind of money that would make theatrically, it makes a very interesting dynamic, because it shows how vastly different theatrical and streaming are. Because if Extraction were put in theaters, do you think Extraction would make $2 billion? No,
I think it could have done okay. I think it would have done maybe a solid but unspectacular business. I don't think we'd even be getting a sequel, to be honest. You know, and the whole thing about streaming hours, like if you look at the Netflix top 10s that they put out, you know, like US Marshals was at like the top of the list in a bunch of countries the other day, and I don't see them rushing out. We got to make a fucking another Sam Gerard movie for this 25-year-old action. You know, things just randomly happen, and the algorithm pushes things in a certain way. You know, it's alchemy almost.
Yeah, I think that's where, you know, the convergence of theatrical and streaming. They're just such vastly different models.
The only time I felt that like a Netflix movie really captured the zeitgeist was probably Black Box, the Sandra Bullock movie. Like it really seemed like that was Bird Box. It was the only one that I remember everybody really talking about. Yeah. And I think that with a lot of the true crime and the documentaries, those things catch on differently. It's a different metric.
Well, I think Bird Box was conceptually a very interesting movie, but yeah, you know, it's like that's another one where, like you had said, you're not sure if Red Notice sequels will happen. Where's the Bird Box sequel? Like that should have been out already, you know? And it's kind of like, I feel like these movies on Netflix, they come out, they're like, oh, it was so good. And they're like, okay, cool. So like, they were gonna make another one. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Someday we're gonna make it.
On to the next one. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like, does that happen? But then Sandra Bullock did that other one, the prison movie, which I didn't watch.
And then apparently that's like one of the most streamed movies ever. I think it's just the fact that it's Sandra Bullock. People like her, you know. I mean, it's
So I don't know. I feel like the consistency in terms of, you know, Netflix wanting to build brands and franchises out of movies is just not there. I think the intent and the desire is there, but the follow through is just lacking. But the Russo brothers, interestingly enough, you know, these are guys that directed the second highest grossing movie of all time, and they are now kind of committed to streaming more so than theatrical, which I find fascinating.
They say that though, but then like let's see Comic-Con and hey, the Russo brothers doing Secret Wars, and then, you know,
I mean, maybe I don't know. It sounds like, I mean, they're getting ready to do The Electric State next with Chris Pratt and Millie Bobby Brown, and that's for Netflix. They did Cherry for Apple TV. They, you know, we'll see how The Gray Man does, but The Gray Man will probably do very well for them. You know, like I feel like it will. However, whether it's reported that way or however, like
I don't think anybody's ever. We're never going to get a thing. We'll never find out if the movie flopped or not. We don't know. Yeah, you know. Yeah. It's interesting. You know, I don't know.
Well, even Seth Rogen, you know, when he released that American Pickle movie on HBO Max, which I unfortunately watched. You know, he was like, I like that because I don't have to answer for anything, you know. I don't have to answer for it being a flop, because who's to say, you know.
I think that's why you have so many people sign on to do Netflix movies too, because it looks good for them. It's like, well, you could say
it's a win-win. You get your back end up front, you know, you get like a 50 million payday or whatever, and it's like, boom, you fucking
was the Adam Project actually a hit? Like, I don't know. I mean, who's talking about that movie? You know, I mean,
I enjoyed the Adam Project, but
it's funny though, for streaming movies. So Stallone's Samaritan, that's one that we should talk about. So that's coming to Amazon Prime, which is really weird because when I saw the sizzle
out of nowhere,
they had a trailer cut a year ago that I saw at CinemaCon, and it blew people away and people were cheering after it. I don't understand why they've kind of dropped the ball on that movie so much, because it looked like it was going to be a good movie, and the director just signed on to do something else. Didn't he? Like something pretty big.
What was his name? Avery. Fuck. Hang on, let me look, because I can't recall, but let me look real quick. Samaritan. There we are. Yeah, it's so weird. Like, it was supposed to be coming out in Julius Avery. What is he doing? The Pope's Exorcist? Is that the next one? I thought he was doing something.
No, Julius Avery. He did
Overlord, which I hated.
And he's supposed to do something else too. I forget what it was. Anyway,
right now he's set, at least on IMDb, the Pope's Exorcist. But yeah, I remember hearing something about him doing something else, but I can't remember what it was.
Anyway, I thought the Samaritan, when I saw the trailer for it, I thought it looked amazing. But maybe it didn't work out that way. We'll see. It does seem like
maybe the movie's not amazing. I don't know. I mean, a trailer. Awesome. You and I both know a trailer can be amazing, and
yeah, sure. I mean, but it just seems like it seems like they're dumping it. So I hope it's
that's what I mean. Like, that's what kind of surprised me is when I saw the news. I was like, wow, they're just.
The thing is, it's all MGM movies. So you're seeing a lot of MGM movies go to Amazon now. Like the other one, because they were bought by them. The other one is 13 Lives, the Ron Howard, Viggo Mortensen movie. I just found like that. I was invited to cover the trailer, and it's like, oh, hey, it's on Prime in like 2 weeks. And it's like, what? It was supposed to be like an Oscar corridor movie, like in November. But nope, it's opening a week theatrical or exclusive run.
Viggo Mortensen's doing an accent.
Yeah. I mean, it looks okay. I mean, it's Ron Howard. Fine. They're never great, but they're okay.
There's some Ron Howard movies I think are great. There are.
Yeah, nothing for a while though.
For someone that's done as many, I think he's one of those directors. Like, we tend to like look at the shitty movies he's done and be like, man, he fucking sucks. And then you like go back like, hello, Backdraft, Far and Away, like. Maybe.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Rush. There are a lot of good movies.
Rush, yeah, I mean, he's done some good ones. But he's done some like Beautiful Mind.
I mean, Hillbilly Elegy. I mean, come on, it's an embarrassing.
That one. I didn't.
I mean, it's terrible, but it's so miscast too. I mean, the fact that Glenn Close was nominated for an Oscar for that movie.
Like one of his movies too that I quite liked. I think it's a really unfair shake, and is like the redheaded stepchild of Lucasfilm is Solo. Even though he took over and like redid Chris Miller and what's his nuts' movie, I don't hate Solo. Like, I actually thought it was pretty fun.
I think everybody realizes that if they had been allowed to do their thing, it probably would have been a great movie.
It would have been amazing. We all know it would have been amazing.
Yeah.
Like, it would like, I think it's a very, as it is, it's
kind of an okay movie. We could have gotten an amazing one.
Yeah. It's truly a fucking shame that, that we'll never see.
And I mean, Ehrenreich, the guy, his career would have been so different. Imagine.
I'm sure. His performance would have been different. That was one of their complaints, was that he was like, oh, he's like too funny or too. It's like, dude, that's what they're creating for him.
Just let them do it. He's never going to be Harrison Ford. Like, let them do something different.
Yeah, there's just no way. Like, I'm surprised that Harrison Ford really didn't have much of a say in that. But at the same time, he's like, no one's ever going to be Indiana Jones after me when I'm dead. That's it. When I'm dead, Indiana Jones is dead.
He's gone. When I'm gone, he's gone.
But it's like, here he like, I guess, allowed Solo to happen in that way. It's like,
Speaking of Indiana Jones, there's something interesting to say. After our last episode, I was in LA and I went to the Academy and I saw Raiders on 35 millimeter. And I've seen that movie theatrically a bunch of times. And that movie is one of the best theatrical movies ever, because the audience gets so into it. And it was the screening. I was surprised because a week before Spy Love Me there were people there, but it wasn't packed. It was sold out at Raiders of the Lost Ark. And the audience was just rabid and going crazy with that movie. Mm-hmm. And it is a movie that plays so well on the big screen. But nobody could ever play Indiana Jones but him, though. You really can't. Like, it's just, it's
a very distinct personality. I think it would be, and I think, like Chris Pratt had mentioned, because Josh Horowitz had asked him like, hey, like, what were can you clarify if these rumors were true that you met with Spielberg? And Pratt was like, I saw this interview with Harrison Ford, and I saw the same interview where Harrison Ford was saying, like, he's like, when I'm dead, he's like, Chris Pratt is never going to play me. He's like, when I'm dead, Indiana Jones is dead. And Chris Pratt was like, I don't want the ghost of Harrison Ford to come back and haunt me.
But he's right though, because there's something that Ford has in those movies that nobody else does. And it's just, I don't know what it is. You can't put it.
I know exactly what it is. It's because it's Harrison Ford being Harrison Ford. That's really what it is. And the thing is, here's what it is. We think Harrison Ford is like
Harrison Ford type out there. There's only Harrison Ford.
Exactly. And we can't really say, because Harrison Ford is kind of a reserved guy. He comes off this like curmudgeonly old asshole, right? But Harrison Ford is Indiana Jones. That's who he really is in real life. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is a guy that flies planes and crashes them and, lives this kind of crazy, like reserved life. He gets his ear pierced and he's a carpenter and all this other shit.
The ear, you think he's reserved, but then he does something that really surprises you when he'll come out with like a pierced ear.
I feel like Harrison Ford expresses who he is.
That blew my mind. I went out and I got my ear pierced because of Harrison Ford when I was a teenager. Really, because I saw an interview with him, and I was like, "Fuck, he looks cool." And it was just because he's like a father to my generation, like in a weird way. Like it's just that we all think of him as our dad. We all want his love and we all want his attention. He just doesn't always give it to us, but there's something about it. But then when he does, and it would be hard for me to interview him. He always
whips us with his whip.
Because I'd be wanting his approval so badly.
I think you need to get your ear pierced again in honor of Harrison.
I put an earring in the other day, but it's just there's something about him in that movie too, though, and like the edge, and everybody in the theater started laughing at the part where Mary goes, "I was a child, I was in love." And I was reading more about that, and apparently Lucas and Spielberg had big disagreements over that, because they were like, "Okay, so how old was she?" And then Lucas said something like, "Oh, she was like 11." And then Spielberg was like, "Are you fucking crazy?" He's like, "She was not." And he's like, "She was like 17." And that's like the official Indiana Jones thing, is that she was 17.
I mean, look, Harrison Ford was fucking Carrie Fisher when she was 19. So, and he was married.
Whatever.
That's a very real thing.
I'm not passing judgment on Harrison Ford.
I'm not passing judgment. Hey, listen, like, whatever. Like, there's an age discrepancy as far as I'm concerned. As long as it's legal within the bounds of the law, then so be it. It's like there's all kinds of strange fucking dynamics.
Yeah, if you read about the making of it, though, Lucas is a bit weird with his like suggestion that she be so young. I think Spielberg is. I think the Indiana Jones series. I think if the Indiana Jones series had just been George Lucas, it would have fucking sucked. I think that you needed Spielberg. I think is the one who really made that series.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Lucas,
he's got the edge too that Lucas doesn't have. And it's funny, if you watch Raiders would be R-rated now for sure, like hardcore R-rated, because people are getting shot and there's like explosions of blood. And then the melting faces. That movie would be 100% rated R now, and that's all Spielberg.
I think about that too. Like, even when Indy gets shot in his arm and the blood splatters on the glass in the truck and like all that other shit. Like, it's definitely a more. We're talking about the Gray Man. You think about the Gray Man. Think about Raiders. Raiders is shot practically. There's very few VFX in terms of like. I find it hard to buy that it's cheaper and easier to do big movies. When you look at something like Raiders that was done at a fucking fraction of the cost and done practically, I think about the advancements that have been made in practical effects. I'm like, why are we not using them? I think it's just a corner cutting thing.
I mean, if you think of the great action movies too, the ones with a lot of CGIs are never going to be at the top of the list, because, I think of what's the greatest for me, probably the best action movie of the last decade. Of the last decade? The last decade is probably Fury Road, I would say. And that's mostly all practical. But that's all practical though. There's very little CGI in it, and it costs half of what the Gray Man cost. So
I don't know. Like, I would love to know, like, an honest discussion from the Russo brothers or for these other filmmakers that lean so heavily into it. Is it because they just want a controlled environment? Is it just because it looks good on paper? Or is it because they're fucking lazy? Is it because they're just trying to do everything on the cheap and on the easy without, like, oh my God, we're going to have to drive out to the desert and we're going to have food brought out and we're going to have tents. I'm like, yeah. And your fucking movie is going to look great as a result. Like,
Well, I mean, you watch Raiders and it's all shot on location and they're all doing real stunts. And I mean, the excitement that you get when you watch Raiders of the Lost Ark and Indiana Jones goes under the fucking truck can never be matched by anything else that's coming out nowadays that's CGI. It can't.
Well,
that's why Tom Cruise is so good. That's why people love Tom Cruise, because he's doing this shit for real.
It's him. But I mean, that brings up a good point though too. Like, you look at Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That's one of the biggest complaints, is that Spielberg got lazy.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, who the fuck am I to call Steven Spielberg lazy? But listen, that's what happened in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, is he leaned so heavily into, I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to do the Raiders thing. It's like, well, you don't do the Raiders thing, you ain't going to get the Raiders movie.
I think he realized that though. And I think that's why he graciously bowed out of doing the next one. So we'll see what happens in the next one.
He's like, maybe he did. He's like, look, I'm an old man. I don't want to go in the fucking desert. I don't want to go in the fucking jungle. And it's like, honestly, that's fucking fair. I'm 45 years old. There's times where I'm like, dude, I have no fucking desire to do that. Like, I don't fucking camp or any of that shit anymore. It's like, dude, I've been to fucking combat twice. I've slept on the mountains in Afghanistan in a fucking sleeping bag with my fucking rifle in there with me. I don't have anything left to prove. I'm good.
It's crazy that Harrison Ford turned 80 the other day, though. Isn't that insane?
Insane. How is he still alive? I was looking at a picture of all the people from Star Wars, and it's almost like it's like a scratch off list at this point. It's like you have Hamill and Ford are like the last men standing on this one.
I mean, Ford still looks good though. He still looks like he's fit though. He keeps himself in shape. I mean,
something to be said for that. Good genetics and taking care of yourself. And
I was reading he bikes 40 miles a day every day. Like, it's just he keeps himself going.
Well, I think that's that's part of it. They say when you lose your purpose and you lose, like, people retire, right? And they're just like,
and they die very soon.
Life, you tend to die. It's like, if you're not doing things, like, that's what's going to happen, right? Like, you're going to slowly dwindle away. You don't have a purpose anymore. So there's one other thing I wanted to discuss that I wanted to bring up. We kind of touched on it for a second. About the terminal list. So I'm obviously, I very much enjoyed it. I don't think it's perfect. I think there's some issues.
I've started watching it. I'm a couple episodes in and I'm enjoying it too.
I think by the time, if you finish it, and I do suggest you finish it, I think that
I will finish it. I'm definitely going to finish it. Laura and I are watching it together and we both really enjoy it.
What's really fucking cool about the terminal list, and I know I've talked it to death, but I have a certain aspect I want to talk about, but kind of taking a step backwards. One of the really cool things I like about it is that it really does jump around into different action sequences, and it takes you in some directions. Like, oh, that's pretty fucking cool. There's a whole episode that's basically like a remake of First Blood in a way, like kind of as James Reese, like out in the wilderness doing that. And I think it's a great ode to First Blood. It's not as good as First Blood, of course.
It's funny. The guy who I really like on the show, though, I like Pratt. I think Pratt's great, but the person I really like is Taylor Kitsch.
Yeah, he's great. He's great in it.
But it's funny watching that show and looking at the reactions to it. You wrote something on Twitter the other day where everybody's criticizing it as being right wing, and I don't know where that comes from, because Laura and I have been watching it together and we're trying to spot that, and there's nothing really there. Like, and I think you said it, you were right when you said on Twitter that it's people that are finding it impossible to separate their politics
from it. Yep.
From the reviews, because there's nothing conservative about it. It's about a military man, and it's like it's just I don't get it,
I think it's ironic, and I think the reason for it now is because
in the show the government's out to fuck him. Everybody's out to fuck him. It's a guy, one man alone. Like, that's not necessarily a conservative mindset.
It's essentially Rambo. Like, James Reese in The Terminal List is a combination of Rambo and the Punisher put together, plain and simple. And it's the guy out for revenge.
Everybody's got these ideas about Chris Pratt that I just find they don't match up with reality, because we don't know this for a fact. Like, he's conservative. Do we know he's conservative? And if he is, who fucking cares? Like,
if he is, and we don't actually know it, then how do we know that? Like, there is, he's not,
and he's not going out there trying to make people's lives worse, and like, his wife is very upset about, Roe v. Wade and all that. And if they're really conservative, she wouldn't be posting. She wouldn't be like, it doesn't make any sense. It's people, they're so down on him because I guess he's Christian. Who cares?
Well, when we say people, let's be very clear. We're talking about a number of blue checkmark idiots on Twitter and a bunch of randoms on Twitter that are very against him. You look at his follower count on those, he's got like something like 14 million followers. Those aren't all hate follows, I guarantee you. So what's ended up happening here is you're seeing critics, and this is a problem that I have with critics in general. And this is the simple fact. There are not enough diversified critics in thought. Forget about race and gender. There's not enough diversification of thought with critics.
Well, I can tell you
too many ultra left-wing or just left-wing journalists. There needs to be a better spread, because it does not represent the entire population of people.
Divide into politics, but I will say this: what I find is there's this hive mind of film criticism, and it's all LA based or New York based, right? And it's like, if you don't come from there, you don't matter. Right. And when you go to like TIFF or something, you see their big hive like gets together and they like almost collectively decide this movie's good and this movie's bad. And I can tell you that this kind of does happen a lot, and I think the hive kind of decided that The Terminal List was bad. And I don't know why necessarily. I think they were ready to hate it though. I think they were all planning.
Oh, absolutely. They're like, oh, Chris Pratt show. Come on.
Yeah. But then the problem is, though, when you get irrelevant, is that you see how much the audience likes it, and the audience is loving that show. So something very interesting happened on Joe Blow, is that our Terminal List review was tanking originally, okay? But then after everybody started attacking it, people started coming and watching the review, and we were mildly positive. I think our critic gave it a very fair review, because it's not political. His criticisms were 100% valid.
Sure.
And it was
Alex, right? It was Alex.
Yeah, and if you look at the comments, people are all like, well, we enjoyed it more than you did, but thank you for that thoughtful review, or like, oh, this is the one fair review that I've read, and it's kind of that thing, and I think that was, I think that was one of the good things about, anyway, the review now is doing quite a bit better than it was before. And I started watching it, and I think it's a perfectly enjoyable show. And I think people are really reading too much into it politically. I don't understand why.
Well, I can tell you why I think it is because we have become in the last 4, 5, 6 years, places like Twitter, social media, things like that have bred this new kind of thought where it's like you have to inject politics into anything and everything that you say. People are defining themselves, especially and including critics, defining themselves by where they fall politically, which is a sad state of affairs. And the writing is on the wall, such as the Daily Beast review that kind of started all of it by Nick Shager, who called it an unhinged right-wing revenge fantasy. And I read his full review. And he is pretty much, it's like literally just put his politics on his shoulder for this review. It's like, we got it. You're a ultra left-wing guy, and you took offense to The Terminal List, but I wonder if he would have felt the same watching any other action revenge thriller movie or show between the 80s and 90s or even early 2000s and said the same thing. I feel like now the country, the world has become more politically divisive. And now people feel like they have to stand on the shoulders of one of those things in order to get their point across, which is just.
And I don't get it. Like you watch The Terminal List, and it's because of who the author is. I think that's doing it.
Yeah, listen, Jack Carr is a conservative. Jack Carr is a former Navy SEAL. Here's a little thing for anybody that doesn't already know it that should. The people that are protecting your countries, especially the United States of America, the people that actually go through combat training and actually go and fight, they're conservative. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. If that's too much to handle, that's just the way it is. It doesn't mean they're ultra right wing. It doesn't mean that they don't see things on both sides of the spectrum. It means that is the reality.
But I don't understand why people are calling it right wing though, because I really don't.
It's not. It's absolutely not. It's purely a story about a guy that was wronged. And that's kind of the premise.
And he's also wronged by his government, though. So I don't see why that's right wing. And they don't say it was the Democrats that did it or it was the Republicans that did it. It's just he's kind of fucked over by everybody in it. Like that's the thing. Like
there's people that have been like disillusioned with like QAnon conspiracy shit, and they're trying to say, oh, look at this. They're saying that the government is a big conspiracy to like take out, this person. It's like they are, but how many movies and shows have had a government conspiracy? Government was the bad guy. Like they're endless, but all of a sudden, I think it really comes down to timing. It comes down to kind of the political environment that we're in now, where people just, and by people, I mean certain fucking critics, they just can't separate themselves from it. They just, and many of them feel like, no, it's my responsibility to bring this to light. Like, no, you're fucking wrong. You're an idiot. You can't separate any of this. And you're taking all of it and kind of collectively throwing it into this political trash bin. That's nonsense. Like it, as you, like Chris, you are a left-leaning individual. I wouldn't call you left-wing or right-wing, but you're a left-leaning person. You're watching Terminal List and you're not feeling like, oh my God, this is offensive right-wing trash. You're watching the story as it was written, as it unfolds. And the thing is, like, everybody that produced the show, from Pratt to Antoine Fuqua to Jack Carr to Dan DiGilio, all these guys come from different backgrounds, different places. You know what I'm saying? They're all collectively putting this to make it entertaining, cool show, an adaptation of a book. They're not, at no point are they pushing a political agenda. And trust me, I've seen it. I've seen the crazy right-wing shit. I've seen the crazy left-wing shit. It's very recognizable because it's always in your face. Terminal List is just basically a 2-hour action movie spread out into 8 episodes. That's essentially what it is. And it's fucking cool, But
okay, I will say this though. So we should probably start moving on, I think, because we've been at it for a while. But this is something I wanted to talk about too. So what we're watching, the show that I started watching based on your recommendation is The Old Man.
And it's so good.
I have to say, I fucking love The Old Man.
It's so fucking good.
And as much as I like The Terminal List,
Old Man's better. I'll admit it.
It's not even a comparison. Like the Old Man is way better. The
Old Man has like this nuance to it.
Yeah.
So I'm on episode 4.
Oh really? I'm ahead of you. I'm ahead of
me because I was out of town for a while. So
it is.
I watched episode 4 last night.
Yeah, it is a compelling yarn, isn't it?
I'm just like, when it was over, I'm just like sitting there, and what I love about The Old Man is that it's a show that just takes you in a complete, like, you think it's like, oh, it's going to unfold this way. And I think, the part I'm talking about with Amy Brenneman's character, where, you think she's just going to be this kind of damsel in distress, kind of like, character that's going to.
Well, he has that great line to her. He's like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah. And it's like, oh shit. Like, like, it's great to see a show where characters surprise you in a way that makes sense. It's not like they're taking her character and saying, and like pulling some fast one where you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense why she would do that. But you're like, oh.
Well, and it lets you make your own, lets you make your own mind up about people, and it doesn't necessarily present them in a way that this guy is great and this guy's wrong. I like the fact that, Bridges and Lithgow, both of them in the show, I'm kind of on both of their sides. I see where they're both,
exactly, right? Yeah.
I don't think that one's good and one's bad. And I even find what they've done with Alia Shawkat's character very interesting, especially episode 5. There's a lot of really interesting stuff that happens with her there. And but I think Bridges is outstanding on it. I think the actions.
I think it's his best role. I think it's the best role, one of the best roles of his career by far. I'm not gonna say it's his best role ever, but like, this is so different for him. It's so
there's a charge you get when you see a guy like him do a really well-constructed action scene when you've never seen him really do that before.
Yeah.
Like, there's the fight in the first episode. In
the car. Fuck.
Unbelievable. And it's Jeff Bridges doing this, and it's him for real, and the fact that he was like fighting cancer when he was doing this, like, it's just unreal. And it's just, my God, it's a great show.
I'm so glad. I'm excited that it got renewed for a season 2.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious, like, because there's only one book.
Yeah, because I thought that they were going to end it. I thought it would just be a limited series and there'd be some kind of definitive end.
Yeah. So, I was like,
my parents are watching it too. And they were like, oh, okay. We thought it felt like a limited series. And, Laura really likes it as well. Like, everybody that I've kind of talked to about it really enjoyed it.
It's so good. It's so well. It is, to me, it's the best show on TV right now. And I watched The Boys. I watched Terminal List. I watched all that stuff, and I enjoyed all of those. But The Old Man is on a whole other frequency. So,
and I really like Bill Heck as the young Jeff Bridges. I find
he's great, isn't he? I'm like, I think that all the time. I'm like, man, like this guy, he could easily, you could put him in so many different roles. He's just
that should be like the filler part of the show, but I find that I actually really enjoy that part of the show as well. You know, when they come
the scene where he goes and like takes out the Russians.
Well, and it's like you argued in a way to do this bloodless, and he goes, I don't think this is gonna be bloodless.
Yeah,
this
doesn't feel like a bloodless night to me.
Feels like it doesn't feel like a bloodless night to me. Like that. That's pretty good.
But you know, and I think that's
unhinged about him too. That's that I like about the character is that, you know, to this point, you know, at the show where it is now, I'm not convinced that Bridges is 100% a good guy.
Yeah,
you know, I don't know. I don't know where it's going. It might come out that he did something terrible, you know, and it was so that's the thing. They leave it kind of up to you to a certain extent.
Yeah, it's the very definition of complex characters in terms of, you know, a show and stuff like that.
But then, you know, like Lithgow is outstanding too, though.
He's so good, right? Like, and I think the whole thing is like not really knowing who's good or bad, and it's hard to pick a side because you're like, well, I'm not sure who's really good.
Well, and they humanize him right off the bat in the first episode, because when you introduce him, you just see him crying because he's so sad that his son has died, you know, and it's like there's a real person underneath there, you know, which you don't.
That's the whole. It's just brilliant writing. And I think that's something that
immediately sympathetic, and that you're with him. And you know who directed it? The first couple episodes with those great fight scenes is John Watts. You know, so
John Watts is.
I think he put
those first episodes.
Interesting stamp on those first few episodes. So I like where it's going. It's been a show that I've really enjoyed.
Yeah, and then this week is the finale of season 1 because it's 7 episodes.
Oh, is it really? Oh shit.
So it closes up this week.
I thought it was 10. Are you sure? No, I don't think it's 7. I think it's 10.
I'm pretty sure it's 7.
No,
I'll look again, but I'm pretty sure. I looked last night because I was like, how many episodes is this?
I think 7 is where they stopped, and then he came back afterwards.
No, they didn't start till he was done with his. They had started to get going, but then they took like a 2-year break while he got better, and then came back to film.
Maybe it is only 7.
I'm pretty sure it's only 7 because I was researching it last night.
They were 2/3 of the way into shooting when it shut down because of COVID, and then it started. It was only, Bridges only shot like the last 2 episodes or something like that.
Yeah, this one is saying there's 6 episodes, but I'm pretty sure there's 7 because there's one. Yeah, there's 7 episodes. Mm-hmm. So we got 7. But who knows what season 2 will be? But I don't think it really needs. See, this is where, you know, I think like they've used their time so wisely, and nothing feels wasted on the screen. I just love it. I can't recommend it enough to anybody. If you guys are listening, you're on the fence about watching The Old Man. I mean, you have the.
Well, I even like the guy that's the assassin that they sent after him, the black guy.
Yeah.
And he's kind of cool too because he's like a hospice nurse.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's like a hospice guy, and you're just like
not like a bad guy at all. He's a pretty nice guy, and it's like, but he has this other side to him, you know, like
pretty nice for an assassin.
No, but I mean, there's the scene where he meets the girl on the. I was debating that with Laura though. When he meets the girl, and it looks like he's kind of flirting with her. Is he like? Does he want to go out on a date with her, or is he like planning on killing her? Because I didn't know it was she a job.
That's the thing is, you know, in the end, the guy is an assassin. He was sent to kill Jeff Bridges' character, not to like just.
But then he also seems like a really nice hospice nurse, though.
You are a nice hospice nurse assassin, the nicest one I've ever met.
Great job, and I like Joel Grey too, as like the handler, like the father figure to like that's the guy from Remo Williams and Cabaret. I think that was kind of cool too, like that he's like the father figure to Lithgow and Bridges. And they're already fucking old, so you can imagine how old this fucking guy is. The other thing that I really liked was I watched this limited documentary series called Captive Audience that's on Hulu. And it just showed up. Disney Plus always gets everything fucking late in Canada. But I like The Old Man just started on Disney Plus, but I've been watching it on FX. But anyway, so the Captive Audience is a documentary. It's a 3-part documentary. And it's basically about this boy that was pretty famous when I was growing up. His name was Steven Stainer, okay? And what happened was he got kidnapped in the early 70s when he was 7 years old, okay, by this pedophile. And years later, when he was 15 years old, he escaped because what had happened was the pedophile had lost interest in him and had kidnapped another kid. And the kid, what happened was it sparked something in him. And he was like, I can't let this kid go through what I did. So he grabbed him and he took off with him. And then he got into the police station and the police returned him to his family when he was 15. But he was very different than he had been before. And his parents, there was something about them. People didn't believe in therapy back then, you know? And so he never got any kind of therapy or anything like that. And it was pretty terrible because he never admitted off the top that he was molested. But then it came out in the guy's trial and he had to testify to it. And he was bullied afterwards because everybody was like calling him gay and shit like that. Like people just didn't have a concept of how that works, you know, right. and what it was and what he must have been through, the hell that this kid went through. And he had a really hard life. And the guy that fucking kidnapped him and molested him for 7 years got 2 years in jail. That was it. Because nobody knew how to sentence anybody for anything like that back then, because there was almost no concept that could happen, that people could do that. It was crazy. And the guy went to jail in his 70s for being a pedophile again, and was probably a pedophile his entire life. It was it was a fucked up story. And this documentary talks about it. But the crazy thing about this kid, he died young in his 20s. Okay. Crazy thing about it is that years later, okay, women start dying in the area that he was kidnapped from. His brother is a serial killer.
I feel like you told me this before. Maybe.
Yeah, isn't that insane? Isn't that insane? Two family brothers, a serial killer, and he's been killing women.
His brother from the family that he got returned to.
Yeah, Yosemite National Park. He's killing women in Yosemite. Wow. Isn't that insane? It's a crazy story.
This is the captive. You said that's the captive.
A captive audience.
Captive audience. Okay.
And this
is on Hulu.
And it's just like, if you were to make this up, you would think that it's all you would think that it was bullshit, that it was completely insane, but it was real.
So dark.
No, it's just insane. And how much like one family could go through. It's just nuts, completely nuts. And it's interesting because his life was made into a TV movie. I Know My Name is Steven. And that was pretty famous in the 80s. And to read all of his journals, they got the guy that played Steven in the film Corin Nemec to come back, and they interview him and like, can you read this guy's journals? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, fuck, this is like, he said, this is trippy, like rereading. And, you know, and I've never, because all the journals came from, it was the guy who wrote that movie, did really extensive research with the family. And you also get like audio tapes of the writer saying, the mother and the father aren't sympathetic enough. We have to kind of make them more, you know, and just the way that they tweak the story for TV and they talk about it, you know, and it's just nuts. It's a really compelling documentary.
I mean, that's a good sales pitch, Chris.
Yeah, it's really good. I would definitely watch it.
If you're listening to this podcast and you aren't looking up Captive Audience at this point,
I watched it.
And we had failed you as a podcast.
Blown away by it. It's because I remember that story though, growing up. That was why you don't get into cars with strangers. It was because of Steven. Remember what happened to Steven?
See, for me, there were two shows, and I can't remember the first one, but there was one where this kid gets kidnapped, and like I remember the cop, I think he was a cop, like shows up at the house and he opens the door and he sees the kid, like for whatever, he tracked the lead down. And there was this kid, like he had been kidnapped and like kind of like adopted as their own child. And he's all disheveled and he like takes the kid. And then like they showed like they made this big scene of the mom on the street while the cop is bringing the kid back to her. And she's like, I have to figure out which one it is.
Yeah. And I think that's Without a Trace.
That might be it. I don't know.
Judd Hirsch is
Judd Hirsch. That's the one. That's
my buddy.
Judd Hirsch. And the other one is the Adam Walsh story. That was like
the Adam Walsh story is fuck. That's another one you could turn into the Boy on the Milk Carton. Yeah, I mean you could turn that.
Yeah, I mean go watch Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer and you can kind of get it.
Yeah, and it's just
taste for that because it's.
And then the guy's father became John Walsh of America's Most Wanted. Like, it's just crazy. Yeah, I know. Isn't that? Yeah.
But I remember watching that movie as a kid, the TV movie. I think it was Jo Beth Williams was the mom. I can't recall for sure, but I just remember like that freaked me the fuck out. Probably like is in my DNA in some way. Like when I go to a store and it's like one of those things you think about when you have kids too, especially young kids, like, oh, can I go to the toy aisle? And you're like, No, fuck no, you're not going to the fucking toy aisle. Do you want to like get your head chopped off and
Yeah, that was what happened.
Raped in a van and your body discarded? Like, no, you stay with me.
That poor Walsh kid, yeah. And it was, I think the Star Chamber was kind of based on that as well, the Michael Douglas movie.
I never saw the Star Chamber. Is that a serial killer movie?
No, so the Star Chamber is a really cool movie, actually. It's basically Michael Douglas plays this judge, and he's investigating a case that's very much like the Adam Walsh case, and he has to let the two guys off on a technicality, and he believes, and he can't stand it, right? And he wants to kill these guys. So he discovers through his mentor that there's an underground network of judges called the Star Chamber. And what they do is they put cases on trial again, and they vote guilty or not guilty. And then if the person's guilty, they will eventually, they'll go and kill the person, right? So he joins the Star Chamber to basically go and murder these guys, but it turns out they're innocent. And that's that's the whole kind of concept of the movie. They look guilty, and they're guilty of a million other things, but they're innocent in this case. And it's kind of a cool movie. And the cop is,
I feel like that should be turned into like a series.
Yeah.
That'd be a fucking cool series, man.
Michael Douglas is the cop, and Michael Douglas is the judge. His mentor, the bad guy, is Hal Holbrook, and the guy who's the cop is Yaphet Kotto. It's a pretty cool movie.
Peter Hynes. I feel like that could be a series. Like you could have Michael Douglas
they almost turned it into a series a couple of years ago on FX. It would have been great.
You could have Michael Douglas play the bad judge now.
It was one of my dad's favorite movies when I was growing up, The Star Chamber. So I watched it a bunch.
I'm actually going to look that up. Look at this. You guys are getting so many great recommendations in this episode.
In Canada, it's on Disney Plus.
It's a family movie.
But I think the kid, though, what happened to the kid was based on Adam Walsh.
Oh, in the Star Chamber. Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty freaky. Like if you ever research that stuff, which I really don't recommend if you don't have the stomach for it. But
I remember that though. It was the boy in the milk carton, and I remember as a kid too. Like my parents made me watch this shit because they wanted me to be scared. Right?
Well, your dad was a cop, man.
Well, they didn't want me to get into a van with a stranger. They wanted to, they didn't believe in not triggering somebody because it was like the world's a dangerous place. Sometimes you need to be triggered. Like it's true. Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, and I don't have a lot from what I've been watching. I've been watching a lot of old movies with my stepdaughters and my son in the past couple of weeks, but I have been catching up on
right? Your stepdaughters are staying with you?
No, I was in Utah for like 2.5 weeks. Just kind of doing like a little summer vacation thing. And my son came with me too. So it was just kind of a big collective thing, but it's really fun to play. So I've never had daughters before. So it's fun to like kind of show them movies they haven't seen before. Cause I found that they've been a little sheltered in a way. Like they're very much into like the Disney shows. And like I had a screener for Zombies 3, the Disney show, and they were super excited about it. So they, I let them watch that. I was like, I'll never fucking watch it, but hey, here you go. Like you guys can watch it. And they loved it. But it's fun what I find interesting and fun is to show movies to people that they've never seen before, and to see, it's like you get to relive those movies again. Anytime you show a movie to somebody that, is a movie that you really love, and showing that to them and seeing their reaction is always a fascinating thing, especially for kids, because you think about our childhood, the movies we watched growing up, we probably watched a lot of things that I guess we quote unquote should not have seen. I don't know that I really subscribe to that anymore, that theory that, oh, you shouldn't have seen that at that age. It's like, things happen in your life that probably should never happen to you. It's like, you're going to have to like face these things at some point. So, but anyways, we watched a bunch of movies. We watched like Pee-wee's Big Adventure. They'd never seen Napoleon Dynamite.
I tried to watch Pee-wee's Big Adventure to Laura, and she fucking hated it.
How do you hate Pee-wee's Big Adventure?
Well, she didn't understand what he is. That's the thing. She didn't get it. Like she's.
Well, that's like my stepdaughters were the same way. They were like, is he a boy or a man? And I was like, he's a boy man, is what he is.
The point. Oh, Francis.
I know you What am
I? The fact that Francis is old too. My thought, they said I can have whatever I want for my birthday, Pee-wee.
Well, so I do this thing. I take this quote from Pee-wee that I say all the time. Whenever somebody is like talking to me and they're like telling some fucking stupid story or like they're going on and on and on, they get to the end and I go, I love that story. I do that all the fucking time. And so we're watching it, and I've used this on my stepdaughters and my wife and my son like for years and years, right? And that scene comes on, I'm like, watch this scene. And that's when he goes like, I love that story. And they all turn and look and they're like, oh, that's where it came from. I do it all the time. They'll just be rambling, like especially little kids. They start telling one of their dumbass kid stories. They're like, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I love that story. Do it all the time. So that was fun to play that. Now here's another one. I put on Starship Troopers, and I put it on because I'd been thinking about it. Yeah. And I also put it on because I was like, I kind of wanted them to like be challenged by it and see if they just ran away to another room or if they actually watched it. And they sat and watched fucking Starship Troopers, and they won't admit it, but they fucking loved it. And they won't admit it. They're like, oh, we hated everything about it. I was like, oh, you just hate watched it for an hour and a half. Okay. You just sat there mesmerized with your hatred. But I think that that's, you know, it's one of those things you got to kind of test those limits. And Starship Troopers is as bloody and gory as it is. It's still very much like a propaganda goofball kind of silly movie. And I fucking love it. I fucking love Starship Troopers. So it's fun to rewatch that with them. But the other thing that I've been watching, the only other thing I've been watching and catching up on, I know you're well beyond it, is 1883.
Oh man, I love that show. Which is serious though. And that was a bait and switch because it was supposed to be ongoing, and then they fucking end it with the last episode, and then he's like, yeah, no, it's done.
Yeah. Well, now we'll have 1883 that's going to have a spin-off. Yeah. It's like a spin-off, but it's on a totally different character.
Bass Reeves, which is a very interesting.
Very interesting. Essentially the Lone Ranger. Which I think that'll be interesting. I'm absolutely
David Oyelowo. That's a very interesting character, and the guy like
his story is crazy.
Arrested his own son for murder, and then it's crazy. Yeah,
there's so much in that's interesting.
And being a black sheriff and
the first black federal marshal ever.
Yeah,
it's a very it's gonna. I think
always got his man. Yeah.
But anyways, 1883 is very much like it is. It's so Yellowstone in the melodrama, and I love it, but it's like so fucking like just dark melodramatic, like, you know, the river crossing scene. I'm not all the way done yet, but like the river crossing scene where Faith Hill has to like push the girl away and make her drown, and she's up on the banks and like she's bashing the ground, and you know, the boyfriend getting shot. I was like, of course that's gonna happen.
It's a hard life for these people.
It is. Yeah, it's like it is essentially the Oregon Trail, the movie. That's essentially what it is.
There's one plot twist that I thought was a little bit goofy. I'll talk about when you've done with the show, but I really liked it overall. And I thought that Isabel May is great in that show.
Yeah, she really is. She's
I love Tim McGraw is great. Faith Hill is great. I loved Sam Elliott.
I love the whole cast is LaMonica Garrett. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, he was in Terminal List as well. Yeah.
And his character is not in the Terminal List book, by the way. He's a totally created character for the show.
He's great in 1883. And
he has an interesting fate in Terminal List. I'll be interested to talk to you once you finish it. There's some scenes in the Terminal List where they get towards the end where even me, I was like, whoo, that's fucking.
So the guy that plays Chris Evans is commanding officer, not his commanding officer, but the one that kind of backs him up. What?
Admiral Pillar?
No, but not the admiral. The guy who kind of backs him up, the young guy who's with him when he confronts the admiral, when he puts him like in the chokehold.
Oh,
he goes,
right.
Let him go now. That guy, he was one of the antagonists in the show that I really liked called Banshee. And,
Banshee, good old Banshee.
It was Anthony Starr was the lead on that show. And that's another show. Anybody wants to see like a great action show, watch Banshee.
Homelander.
Yeah, Homelander, but like as the good guy, it's like the anti-hero.
It's hard to even. I know because I thought about going back and watching Banshee.
Yeah, but he looked.
I don't know if I could look at him.
But they made him. He looked different though. He had like a shaved head and a beard, so it was different. Like he wasn't as clean cut as he is as Homelander, but he was a much nicer guy.
He's so good as Homelander though. Like,
that guy's great actor.
I don't give a shit about awards. I think awards are fucking stupid. But if Hollywood is like rewarding its best, then it really should be recognized.
That guy's a great actor.
Yeah, he's so fucking good as Homeland. And even Carl Urban, Carl Urban is fucking great as Billy Butcher. I think he's brought that character to life perfectly. I just think the whole cast of The Boys is fucking great. I really love it. So the last thing I was going to talk about before we take listener questions, which we haven't addressed yet, is we lost James Caan. And James Caan is one of those actors that, he's been in like everything. He's like, just, he's kind of part character actor, part real actor. He's done a lot of different roles. Won an Oscar for Rollerball in the 70s.
Oh, he didn't win an Oscar for Rollerball. He won an Oscar for The Godfather. Dude.
No, it's Rollerball.
He did not win an Oscar for Rollerball. He won, and it wasn't even, I don't even think he won for Godfather. I think James Caan did not win an Oscar for Rollerball.
Okay.
Rollerball is a great movie, but he didn't win an Oscar for Rollerball.
Oh, I fucked it up then. What the fuck did he win an Oscar for? He won an Oscar for
Godfather, I think.
Was it Godfather? Hang on.
No, he was nominated for an Oscar. I don't think he ever won an Oscar.
I think he was nominated for. Yeah, he was nominated for Rollerball.
No, he wasn't nominated for Rollerball.
Okay, I'm wrong. It was The Godfather.
It was a Saturn Award. He was nominated for Rollerball.
Yeah, he won it. He won the Golden Scroll.
Yeah. No, he was nominated for one Academy Award once for The Godfather.
Yeah, for Godfather, 72. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, James Caan, I don't know that he necessarily deserved awards. I don't give a shit about awards, but a lot of great movies.
Oh, I think he gave one of the greatest performances ever in Thief as Frank. I mean,
Thief is a great fucking Michael Mann thriller. First.
That's my second favorite movie of 1981 after Raiders, but it's just like I think
it's hilarious that you have rated movies for 1981.
That was the year I was born.
What about 1987?
Oh, 87. My
top
favorite,
5. Go.
My favorite movie, 1987. Stand By Me would be on there. RoboCop, Predator. A lot of great movies that year. I'd have to think about it though.
Anyways, yeah, Thief is an amazing. It's just an amazing Michael Mann movie overall, but he's great in it. Probably my favorite performance from James Caan would be Misery as Paul Sheldon.
Oh, Misery's great. But I mean, when I think of Misery, I think of Kathy Bates.
I think that's what happens though, is everybody's like, oh, Kathy Bates, who did win an Oscar for that. But I'm like, her performance, I don't think would have been as good if it wasn't for him.
I really love him in Way of the Gun. He's great in that.
Way of the Gun is so good. It's almost like Way of the Gun is like where you take all of his older roles from like the 70s, 80s, 90s, where he's like the tough, gruff cop, and the badass and everything. And it's like that's the character that's left over after all those movies. Like he's this wise old assassin.
I love him in Rollerball as well. I love that movie. Funny thing though, the first movie I ever saw him in was Alienation. And I think probably
I think that was the same for me. And I saw it in the theater.
Yeah. And I remember also I loved Honeymoon in Vegas as a kid. I thought he was great in that movie.
Never seen Honeymoon in Vegas.
Oh no. Oh, I love that.
I know it's a popular one, but I've never seen it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The Flying Elvises, Utah chapter.
Hey, I've never seen it. I'm okay if I don't see it. That's like Nicolas Cage before he became like action Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, well, Nick Cage for a while did comedies. He did that. He did Guarding Tess.
It Could Happen to You.
Yeah, and Trapped in Paradise.
Yeah, he was doing like a bunch of like. He had such a wild career.
Trapped in Paradise is really funny to watch because Dana Carvey plays the entire role as Mickey Rourke. He talks like this, like hey.
Did you see The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent?
Yeah, I did.
Well, I blind bought it, but I haven't watched it yet. So I'm not.
Fun. There's some Guarding Tess jokes in it.
Oh, thank God. Whew.
Yeah.
Certainly weren't going to address that.
Yeah.
So, anyways, RIP to James Caan. I think it's interesting that probably most people will, continue to remember him on an annual basis by watching Elf during the Christmas season. But he's got a lot of great movies besides Elf that you should definitely check out. If you get the chance. So I think that's about it, Chris. Shall we take some questions if there are any? Let's see what we got. Well, we got a decent amount here. So let's see. Jeremy thoughts on The Gray Man from Paul. Haven't seen it. He read Chris's review. As Paul's reading True Believer now, that's the second book in the James Reese Jack Carr book. If they make Terminal List season 2, who would you cast as Rafe Hastings? I personally would choose Alexander Skarsgård or Chris Hemsworth. For Chris, what was your thoughts on Terminal List? Well, look at that. We covered pretty much everything. I don't know who I would cast as Rafe. I think Chris Hemsworth would be an interesting choice. I don't think that would happen, though. I think Hemsworth is probably too big of an actor in that sense to take a role like that, so I don't think it would happen. But I think there's a lot of different people you could play around for that. For Chris, when is your appointment to get your eyes checked? I don't know what that means.
Because he said that because they said there was no blood in The Gray Man. There's a very modest amount of blood. Okay, whatever. All right.
How did he see The Gray Man already? I haven't seen
What to see in theaters because it's open in theaters.
I didn't see. I actually looked. I actually did look in my listings to see if it was playing, and
it's open here in Montreal as well. Yeah,
I'm gonna check again. If it's playing tonight, maybe I'll go tonight. Just so I can get ahead of it. Let's see. Matt Hicks, my TV is on its last leg. I'm finally getting into the 4K TV world. I already have a 4K Apple TV. Do you think a 4K disc player is a must anymore? I'm gonna be honest, man. Like,
I don't have one.
I have one, but I don't ever fucking use it.
Yeah. I
probably watch a disc.
Yeah, me neither. I buy all my stuff digitally these days. It just is.
Dude,
what it is.
It's so fucking rare that I pop in a disc.
It's funny. So I used to be somebody who was very much into collecting, but now I'm not at all.
Yeah, like it's dwindled substantially. Like I bought Justice League, Zack Snyder's Justice League on 4K because I was like, oh, I want to have it because they weren't offering it on digital. Now that's coming out on digital on the 19th. I'm probably just going to buy it on digital because I'm fucking lazy and I don't want to walk over, get a disc, put the disc in the player, queue it up. I tend to watch
everything digitally as well. Yeah.
It is what it is, man. So I don't know. If you have a 4K Apple TV, I have a 4K. Good enough. Yeah, I have a 4K Apple TV. I don't see any reason why you need a disc unless you're
there's some really enthusiast who's like, these guys do not know what they're talking about.
Yeah, there's some. Yeah, it's probably James Boudreau. He's listening to us right now. He's like, these fucking assholes. But yeah, I'm not a big physical media guy anymore. I mean, what is I don't really have the space for it. I don't want to have to upkeep that collection. There's other things I'd rather put my money into as far as that goes in terms of physical items. And I don't know if this is getting too philosophical for everyone, but you don't own anything. Like everything you have, you're just renting because one day you're going to die and all that shit is going to get spread to the fucking winds and it's not really yours. So I don't know. Do I want to leave a massive collection of discs for somebody to fucking sell off?
It's not even going to exist anymore.
Yeah, like I don't fucking need that shit.
You watch things in 13K now.
So anyways, yeah, I would say I wouldn't worry about getting that player unless you're a complete physical media nerd. Don't worry about it. Shemp Monet, fuck, marry, kill. I don't think we've ever had a fuck, marry, kill on the podcast. Fuck, marry, kill. Top Gun Maverick, Everything Everywhere All at Once, or the Batman 2022. I would have to.
I'm gonna marry Top Gun Maverick.
Same.
Fuck Everything Everywhere All at Once and kill the Batman. It is what it is.
I mean, it would have to be like a blind one night stand for Everything Everywhere All at Once because I haven't seen it yet. I would have to marry Top Gun Maverick. That's a lasting relationship I'd want to keep around.
Yeah.
I would fuck the Batman in its dark, gritty, dirty mouth, and then kill Everything Everywhere All at Once. That could change though.
Yeah.
Once I see it,
you might feel very differently.
Kevin Miller, have you guys watched Severance? Great show. Everybody tells me to watch
I have not. Everybody's saying it's great though. I do need to watch it. Yes.
We're behind the curve. We're both behind the power curve on Severance. I've had multiple people tell me to watch Severance.
It is on the list. I like Adam Scott a lot and Walken and Stiller. So yeah, it's on the list for sure.
Last question from Austin. Austin always with those zingers. What's a movie you're surprised hasn't been remade And what's a movie you would actually like to see remade?
All right. Well, surprised that it hasn't been remade is probably Gremlins, or that they haven't done some kind of spin-off of Gremlins.
Well, they have that animated series coming.
Yeah, I'm surprised they haven't continued that franchise and remade. You know, it's funny, that movie I mentioned, Star Chamber, that'd be a great movie to remake, because I think you could do interesting things with it now that you wouldn't, that I think you could go in a direction that they didn't go in 83. I never think you should remake a great movie. I think you should remake an interesting movie or a good movie and try to make it great. That would be
or a movie that like conceptually.
Yeah, exactly.
Good, that was not good in the way it was.
And that's kind of the Star Chamber as well. Like, it was the concept is fucking amazing. The movie was good, but not, not perfect.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I feel like a lot of Spielberg movies are like that. Like, nobody's ever tried to remake or do a sequel to E.T. Like, that's one of those things I feel like it's like untouchable. Like, oh, we will not touch it. Same with like Back to the Future. They're like, how long are they going to hold out on that? Say that for Die Hard. I hope that like a Die Hard remake happens long after I'm dead.
Yeah.
Like, I don't ever want to see it. Like, just don't ever make it. Just don't do it. But there's a lot of movies out there that I think you could remake anything from the 80s, 90s, any of those. A Rambo remake feels inevitable, right? Like,
yeah,
they rarely come off well. Like, the Point Break remake was so fucking terrible. The Total Recall remake was terrible. I'm just like, don't do it. Just don't do it. Movie I would actually like to see remade. That's actually a great question, because there's movies out there like, man, this movie could use, and I actually was just thinking about one the other day. It's like, this movie could use a polish, like with some new talent. But I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I think it's a great question.
Yeah.
But I think it's one that would require some introspection. There's quite a few out there that, could use it. Just have just take that concept, it's something like Star Chamber for sure. But I think there's a lot of movies out there that could like benefit from a little CGI upgrade or something, some different actors taking on different roles. I think there's room for that.
God, I would almost remake Valerian just with a different lead, like that's kind of, I think it was a cool movie and they just really fucked up the lead.
I need to watch that again. I saw it in theaters and I was so fucking tired. It's one of those movies where I was so tired.
Yeah.
And I think I was like doing the nod towards the end.
Just one ingredient was off. That was it. But the rest of the movie was great. Yeah. But it was a very important ingredient.
Yeah. Fuck, man. I love that. I actually love that question. And I wish I had a better response for it. I hate that I don't, but yeah, I feel like there's just so many movies you could do like that. Fuck. I could make like a whole list, a whole roster. Let me.
Yeah, you froze for a bit. It looked like you were pondering that question, but it went on.
I actually didn't freeze. I was pondering. This was it. It was like this.
Yeah.
Not frozen.
Anyway, dude, it was good talking to you again. Good episode.
Yeah, man. Good to catch up. Good to get back on it. Again, I know for our listeners, we have Comic-Con coming up, stuff like that. So we'll try and stay on top of it. I do want to try and bring in some more guests as we go forward here. They're going to be a little more fun. I have some interviews that I'm trying to line up for the show, different people that I think would be really fun for Beard and the Bald. So there's more interviews on the way. And then, we'll certainly be talking about all the crazy fucking Comic-Con shit that's going to happen, which is inevitable. And I'm excited actually to hear Chris's experience, because it'll be his first Comic-Con. And I remember my first Comic-Con vividly, and it was an amazing experience. So I look forward to hearing if Chris has something similar. I want to hear Chris's Hall H stories, because I don't think he really knows what he's in for. It's going to be nuts. So that's it for us. Remember to love what you love, and we will see you guys next time.